The world changed this morning. At approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, local time on March 14th, 2026, United States Central Command executed a large-scale precision strike on Kharg Island, Iran, destroying more than 90 military targets in one of the most consequential single nights of this war. President Trump announced it himself on Truth Social Friday night. His words, "Moments ago, at my direction, the United States Central Command executed one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East and totally obliterated every military target in Iran's crown jewel, Kharg Island." Kharg Island is not just a piece of land. It is a 5-mile stretch of territory off the Iranian coast in the Persian Gulf that handles 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. 90%. Every barrel of oil Iran has sold to the world for decades has flowed through that terminal. CENTCOM confirmed the strike destroyed naval mine storage facilities, missile storage bunkers, and multiple other military sites. The oil infrastructure itself was preserved deliberately. And Trump said exactly why. If Iran does anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, he will immediately reconsider that decision. That is not a warning. That is a loaded gun sitting on the table with a very clear instruction manual. And what the CENTCOM strike report says about what was destroyed inside those 90 targets is worse for Iran than any headline you have seen today. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now. This war is moving by the hour. The next 72 hours will determine whether Iran backs down from the strait, whether the USS Tripoli and its 2,500 Marines arrive before or after the next escalation, and whether oil prices crash or explode. Every person watching this video has a financial stake in what happens next. Let me give you the timeline that explains how last night happened, because nothing in war is accidental. 14 days ago, on February 28th, 2026, the United States and Israel launched joint strikes on Iran with the stated goal of eliminating Iran's nuclear capability and ending its ability to threaten American interests with missiles, drones, and ships. Supreme Leader Ali Hosseini Khamenei was killed in the opening hours of the operation. 13 days ago, on March 2nd, an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps official declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. 11 days ago, Iranian forces began attacking commercial ships in the waterway. 10 days ago, on March 4th, oil crossed $100 per barrel for the first time since 2023. 8 days ago, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced the operation was entering Phase 2, targeting Iran's defense industrial base. The factories, buildings, and production lines that build every missile, every drone, every weapon Iran has. The goal was to ensure the regime can never rearm. 6 days ago, the State Department offered $10 million in rewards for information on Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, naming him alongside the regime's top national security official, Ali Larijani, and intelligence minister, Esmail Khatib. 3 days ago, Trump publicly called Iran's new leader wounded and likely disfigured, a man hiding in a bunker with no functional command of the forces carrying out attacks in his name. 2 days ago, a United States KC-135 refueling aircraft went down in western Iraq. All 6 crew members aboard were killed. CENTCOM confirmed the loss was not due to hostile fire. The U.S. military death toll in this operation now stands at 13. 7 were killed by enemy fire. 8 service members are severely injured, according to the Pentagon. Then this morning, the announcement, Kharg Island struck, 90 military targets destroyed, and Trump's red line about the oil infrastructure made explicit on the public record. Now let's go inside the document that tells you exactly what was destroyed last night. On March 14th, 2026, United States Central Command posted its official strike report to X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. This is the primary government document. It is not an interpretation. It is not an op-ed. It is the official military record of what happened overnight. Here is what it says. In the opening line of the CENTCOM statement, the language is precise. U.S. forces executed a large-scale precision strike on Kharg Island, Iran. The strike destroyed naval mine storage facilities, missile storage bunkers, and multiple other military sites. U.S. forces successfully struck more than 90 Iranian military targets on Kharg Island while preserving the oil infrastructure. Read that carefully. Naval mine storage facilities. Those are the mines that Iran has been using to threaten shipping in the Persian Gulf. The mines that have been keeping 150 ships stranded in the Hormuz region. The mines that have pushed oil above $100 per barrel. By hitting the storage facilities, the United States did not just destroy the mines that were already deployed. It destroyed Iran's ability to replace them. Then read the second element of that same statement, missile storage bunkers. Defense Secretary Hegseth announced days ago that every company that builds every component of Iran's ballistic missiles has been functionally defeated. The missile storage bunkers on Kharg Island were the final supply line. Iran's missile volume is currently down 90% from where it started this war. One-way attack drones are down 95%. Read that again. That changes this. Because what the CENTCOM report is telling you is that Iran is not being weakened. Iran is being systematically disarmed. The strikes are not punishing Iran. They are removing Iran's physical ability to fight. I want to spend a moment on one word that President Trump chose when he announced the strike. He did not say the United States hit Kharg Island. He did not say the United States targeted Kharg Island. He did not say the United States struck Kharg Island. He said the United States totally obliterated every military target on Kharg Island. Obliterated is not a military word. It is a psychological word. Think about what alternatives were available and why they were passed over. Destroyed is precise and neutral. Military planners use it to mean a target is no longer functional. Struck is operational. It describes the act of attack without claiming a result. Degraded is the safe Washington term that allows for uncertainty. Trump chose none of those words. He chose obliterated, and he chose it publicly on Truth Social in all capital letters before CENTCOM had issued its own formal statement. That word choice tells you something about intent that goes beyond the military operation itself. Obliterated is a message to Iran's new supreme leader, to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and to every nation currently watching this war from a safe distance. It is designed to produce a psychological effect on the Iranian decision-making chain that cannot be produced by accurate but neutral language. It says, what you had is gone, not damaged, not degraded, gone. When a commander-in-chief uses that specific word about an enemy's crown jewel at 2 in the morning before his own military has formally reported, he is not describing military reality. He is shaping it. I have to be fair here. The other side has a point, several points, actually. The first counterargument is from the Iranian side itself, specifically from Ehsan Jahanian, the deputy governor of Bushehr, the port city closest to Kharg Island, who stated on Saturday morning after the strikes that exports, imports, and the activities of companies on the island are proceeding normally. Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency quoted Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi saying Iran would certainly respond to the strikes, but would act cautiously to avoid targeting densely populated areas. The counterargument is real. If 90 military targets were obliterated and the oil terminal is still operating normally, then what exactly was destroyed? Iranian officials are disputing the scale of the damage. That is a genuine factual question that deserves an honest answer. The second counterargument comes from Dr. Elizabeth Saunders, professor of political science at Georgetown University, writing in Foreign Policy on March 9th, 2026, who argues that the pattern of escalation in this conflict, strike, counter-threat, bigger strike, counter-threat, has no visible exit ramp. Saunders' point is that each escalation creates a new floor for the next round. Today's obliteration of Kharg military targets becomes tomorrow's baseline. If Iran retaliates by targeting U.S.-linked oil facilities in the United Arab Emirates, which it has explicitly threatened to do, saying it would reduce those facilities to a pile of ashes, then the pressure to strike the Kharg oil infrastructure itself becomes almost politically irresistible. The third counterargument is the one the oil markets are currently pricing in. At $100 per barrel as of the close of trading Friday, the market is not celebrating an American victory. It is pricing in risk. Christian Buger, professor of international relations at the University of Copenhagen and an expert in maritime security, told Al Jazeera this week that the shipping industry currently finds it impossible to go through the Strait of Hormuz. The argument is that destroying military capacity does not automatically reopen a shipping lane when the other side has demonstrated a willingness to keep closing it. But here's where I have to be direct. The counter-arguments all assume Iran has sustained the ability and the will to keep escalating. Defense Secretary Hegseth's own numbers say otherwise. Missile volume down 90%, attack drones down 95%, every ballistic missile production facility in Iran functionally defeated. At some point, the math runs out, and what Hegseth described Thursday, intelligence that gets better and better with every strike, a targeting loop that feeds itself and exponentially increases what can be hit. That feedback loop is accelerating, not slowing. The critics are applying linear logic to an exponentially deteriorating Iranian military situation. Let me draw the line directly from last night's strikes to what you are going to pay at the pump and at the grocery store in the next 2 weeks. Start with oil. Brent crude closed Friday at approximately $100 per barrel. That is the number Trump is watching most closely. He said it himself. Gas prices, as soon as this is over, are going to come tumbling down along with everything else. And he sees a path back to the $50 range where oil sat in January. Here is the math the White House is working from. Every day the Strait of Hormuz is closed, the International Energy Agency estimates the war is cutting global oil supply by approximately 8 million barrels per day. The IEA has already released 400 million barrels from emergency reserves, the largest such release in the history of that institution. That is an emergency measure, not a sustainable one. If the strait does not reopen, the reserves run out, and oil does not go back to 50. It goes to 140. That is the Oxford Economics breaking point scenario, and it is no longer theoretical. Here is the cause and effect chain that runs directly from Kharg Island to your wallet. The United States struck 90 military targets on Kharg Island overnight, preserving the oil infrastructure but explicitly threatening to destroy it if Iran keeps blocking the strait. Iran immediately threatened to reduce U.S.-linked oil facilities in the region to a pile of ashes if the oil infrastructure on Kharg is attacked. The USS Tripoli is now steaming from Okinawa, Japan, with 2,500 Marines aboard. Trump simultaneously posted that many countries will be sending warships to help keep the strait open and safe. If the strait reopens, oil drops. If it does not reopen, and if Iran follows through on its threat against Gulf oil facilities, Goldman Sachs economists Manuel Abacassis and David Merickel's severe scenario, oil at $110 sustained, U.S. inflation rising to 3.3%, recession probability at 25%, moves from model to reality within 30 days. That is the number you will feel at the pump, at the grocery store, and on your heating and electricity bills before summer arrives. For your family's security, 13 American service members have now lost their lives in this operation. 7 were killed by enemy fire. The U.S. military death toll is real, and it is being carried by real families. 8 service members are severely injured, according to the Pentagon. The USS Tripoli deployment adds 2,500 more Americans to the operational theater. These are not abstract geopolitical assets. They are fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. Let me tell you what named experts across the ideological spectrum are converging on, because the agreement here is striking in its specificity. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, speaking at a Pentagon briefing on Friday, stated that in just the first 13 days of this operation, U.S. forces have made history. He described Iranian ballistic missile production capacity as entirely functionally defeated. Every company that builds every component of every missile has been destroyed, buildings, complex, and factory lines all across Iran. He described intelligence that gets better with every strike and a feedback loop that exponentially increases targeting precision. That is not spin. That is an official military assessment from the Secretary of Defense on the public record. On the economic side, Goldman Sachs economists Manuel Abacassis and David Merickel, writing in a report published Wednesday, March 11, 2026, raised their 2026 U.S. recession odds by 5 percentage points to 25%. Goldman modeled 2 scenarios. In the base case, oil averages $98 through April, and U.S. inflation runs at 2.9%. In the severe case, oil averages $110 for a full month, and inflation hits 3.3%. 5 points in a single week is a significant revision from the institution that spent 3 years calling for a soft landing. Christian Buger at the University of Copenhagen, speaking to Al Jazeera, said the shipping industry currently finds it impossible to transit the Strait of Hormuz. His assessment: without stronger signals soon, the world is facing a shipping crisis that could last weeks, if not months. That is a maritime security expert with no political stake in the outcome of this war. And Iran's own foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, quoted by Tasnim on Saturday morning, said Iran would certainly respond to the Kharg Island strikes, but would act cautiously to avoid targeting densely populated areas. That is a de-escalation signal embedded inside a retaliation threat. Araghchi said it. That is a named official with a specific qualifiers, cautiously fast, that was not in any previous Iranian statement. A defense secretary describing exponential targeting improvement, Goldman Sachs modeling 25% recession risk, a Copenhagen maritime expert saying the strait is impossible for shipping, and an Iranian foreign minister qualifying his retaliation threat with the word cautiously. 4 voices from 4 entirely different positions, all pointing to the same inflection point. This war is approaching a moment that forces a decision from Iran. When professionals across the entire ideological ideological spectrum converge on the same assessment, that convergence is the most reliable signal available. Here's what nobody in the mainstream coverage is saying out loud and what the facts make inarguable. Iran's foreign minister Araghchi used the word cautiously when describing Iran's planned retaliation for the Kharg Island strike. That word was not in any previous Iranian statement. Every previous statement used absolute language. A pile of ashes, not a liter of oil will pass, $200 oil. Cautiously is a different word. It is a word that leaves room. It is a word that a foreign minister uses when the people above him are running out of options and the people around him are telling him not to close every door. Iran still has not struck the oil infrastructure of a Gulf state directly. Iran still has not deployed what it calls its most advanced weaponry, HIMARS missiles, against U.S. bases. Iran's missile volume is down 90%, and its drone volume is down 95%, according to the Secretary of Defense. The regime whose supreme leader was killed 2 weeks ago, whose new supreme leader is reportedly wounded, disfigured, and possibly unaware of his own leadership, whose missile factories are destroyed, and whose naval mine storage on Kharg Island was obliterated last night. That regime used the word cautiously this morning. The mainstream coverage is treating this war as an open-ended conflict with no resolution in sight. The evidence points to a regime that is beginning to calculate the cost of continuing. The closest historical parallel to what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now is not a foreign example. It is American. In the late 1980s, during the final years of the Iran-Iraq War, Iran attempted to close the Persian Gulf to international shipping through mine-laying, gunboat attacks, and threats against tankers. The United States responded with Operation Earnest Will, beginning in 1987, the largest naval convoy operation since World War II, in which the U.S. Navy escorted Kuwaiti tankers through the Gulf under American flags. Iran attacked. The U.S. Navy hit back. In Operation Praying Mantis, in April of 1988, U.S. naval forces sank or destroyed half of Iran's operational navy in a single day. The threat to Gulf shipping ended. The structural logic in 2026 is identical in these specific ways. Iran is using asymmetric naval harassment, mines, speedboats, drone attacks to threaten a waterway it cannot close by conventional military means. The United States is systematically eliminating Iran's ability to sustain that harassment by destroying the military assets that make it possible. CENTCOM destroyed the naval mine storage facilities on Kharg Island overnight. The warships are surging. The Marines are on the way. In 1988, one day of American naval action ended the threat. The question today is not whether the United States has the capacity to force the strait open. It clearly does. The question is whether Iran will choose to test that capacity or whether the word cautiously means what it sounds like it means. Here are 5 specific dates and events that will tell you everything about what comes next. By March 17th, 3 days from today, Energy Secretary Christopher Wright told CNBC on March 13th that U.S. Navy tanker escort operations could begin by the end of this month. If no formal escort operation has been announced by March 17th, watch the oil price that morning. Every day that passes without an operational escort announcement, while Iran continues to threaten shipping ads, compounding pressure on the energy markets and on the political clock inside the White House. On March 20th, the European Union Council meets in Brussels. The Italians and the French are already in negotiations with Iranian officials about backing off the strait, according to the Jesse Waters primetime report Friday evening. If a joint EU statement includes any language welcoming those negotiations, that is the first multilateral diplomatic signal that an off-ramp is being constructed. If the EU says nothing about the Italian and French back-channel negotiations this week, that silence has meaning. Watch for Iran's formal response to the Kharg Island strike in the next 48 hours. Araghchi said Iran would certainly respond, but would act cautiously. The size and target selection of that response will be the clearest signal available about whether Iran's military leadership believes it still has the capacity and will to escalate, or whether the word cautiously reflects a genuine shift in calculation. Watch the USS Tripoli's arrival timeline. The ship departed Japan and is carrying 2,500 Marines, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, with F-35 fighters, attack helicopters, and a ground combat element aboard. Its estimated arrival in the operational theater will indicate whether the United States is preparing for a naval escort operation, a coastal operation, or both. Watch Trump's daily Truth Social posts about oil prices. He has been watching the $100 oil price closely and has said prices will drop significantly significantly once the operation is complete. If he posts about oil prices 3 or more times in a single day, that is a signal that the economic pressure is beginning to override the military timeline in the White House's internal calculus. Here is where things stand tonight, based only on confirmed facts. United States Central Command struck more than 90 military targets on Kharg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal, overnight on Friday, March 14th. CENTCOM confirmed the destruction of naval mine storage facilities and missile storage bunkers while preserving oil infrastructure. Trump said he will reconsider that decision if Iran interferes with Strait of Hormuz shipping. Iran threatened to target U.S.-linked oil facilities in the region in response. The U.S. military death toll stands at 13. The USS Tripoli and 2,500 Marines are now deploying from Japan toward the operational theater. Oil is at approximately $100 per barrel. Goldman Sachs recession odds stand at 25%. What is not yet confirmed is whether Iran will follow through on its threat to strike U.S.-linked Gulf oil facilities, whether the Italian and French back-channel negotiations with Iranian officials will produce any shift in Iran's position on the strait, and whether the word cautiously in Araghchi's Saturday statement reflects a genuine change in Iranian strategic calculation, or is diplomatic language designed to buy time? The answer to each of those three questions will determine whether oil goes to 50 or 140. The question I am leaving you with tonight is this: if Iran's missile volume is down 90%, its drone volume is down 95%, its naval mines are destroyed, its supreme leader is reportedly wounded and possibly unaware he is the supreme leader, and its foreign minister is using the word cautiously. At what point does this stop being a war and start being a negotiation? And who gets to decide when that line has been crossed? Leave your answer in the comments. I read everyone. Subscribe, turn on notifications. When the next development breaks, I will be here document by document, statement by statement, the way this story deserves to be covered.